When talking about holster wedge use, it's important to keep two pieces of terminology in mind. One is fulcrum and the other is filler. Fulcrum gives your holster wing a pivot point on which to act. Filler refers to the amount of space between the muzzle and your body in the pistol's optimal position. If you're like me, you might need both at the same time. Hi, I'm John from FULCRUM, and by now I'm sure you've seen Tessa's amazing videos about wedge use, especially the Wedge Use Masterclass. We're in a circumstance where we get to see how people deploy these techniques in their exploration of concealment and on their way to having concealed carry success in the FULCRUM Concealment Workshop. We've helped tens of thousands of people improve their concealment, and I want to take this opportunity to really fine-tune how we talk about wedges, because we see a number of kind of like trends and issues in how people implement a wedge. And I think that by getting into a little bit more detail and assigning vocabulary to the two key functions of a wedge, and then talk about how they apply to two different body types, we can help people have a lot more success. If you haven't seen that video already, I recommend checking it out. There'll be a link in the description and somewhere on the screen. And we've got a whole bunch of extra yoga block left over, and I'm going to start demonstrating two important concepts that I think are going to help out a lot of people. One is filler, and the other is fulcrum. And how you're shaped is going to depend on which of these elements you use and in what combination. When we talk about a wedge, we're not just talking about something shaped like a doorstop that you slap on the back of your holster. We're actively trying to use belt pressure to influence how the pistol conforms to the body. Let's say we have a little bit more of a rounded and protruding midsection, where when we put the gun on our body, the grip wants to tip outward. What we're trying to do in that circumstance is level the gun back. So part of your body is curving away from the kind of axis that you want the gun to be on, right? So in that case, just like that, if our abdomen curved substantially and we needed to fill in the gap between the muzzle and our abdomen, we're going to use filler. What I see happen frequently is that someone will say something like, oh, I've tried a wedge, it doesn't work for me. And then I'll see a picture of what it is that they're trying to do, and the shape of the wedge doesn't really have a relationship to the problem that they're trying to solve, or necessarily to their body. So if you, for instance, implement the poke and check, as you'll see in a video somewhere else on this screen, and the gun tips back into your body a lot, that's an indication that you need a lot of filler. The other aspect that we're going to talk about is fulcrum. And I see this be something that a lot of smaller people or people with a flatter midsection need to implement but don't. For instance, we'll see folks will say, oh, I have to make my belt really tight in order to get a lot of concealment. Or I've cranked down on my belt and I've broken two holsters, or I've broken the wing off of a holster. That's an indication that the wing doesn't really have a corresponding pivot point. You can only get so much out of the wing before it needs a little assistance somewhere else. Like if you're very flat along where you're trying to conceal the pistol, but the grip still sticks out and belt pressure doesn't do it anymore, you need some fulcrum. So for instance, let's demonstrate it like this. And you'll see that it doesn't have the same kind of dramatic taper as this piece, nor is it going to be nearly as wide. So for instance, we'll take a small sliver here and we place it on the back side of the holster opposite of the wing. So see what I'm talking about there, where we start to get more rotation because we've got a pivot point. And you can obviously change the location of that pivot point to get more rotation. In this case, filler is going to give you a lot of tip back into the body, a lot of slide tuck. Now, here's where the interesting part happens. Your anatomy might require a combination of both shapes. Mine does, for instance. So we're going to start talking about something that works on two axes, the rotational axis and the tuck axis, right? We're going to implement fulcrum and filler at the same time. So I'm going to cut off a shape that has a filler style wedge to it, and I'm going to make it about as narrow as it needs to be on the pistol. And then I'm going to cut it on an additional axis. So you can see that we've got a couple different shapes going on. It's tapering this way and this way, so that when I place it on the body, it fills in the spot that it needs to fill, and it fulcrums in the spot that it needs to fulcrum. So this is going to tip the gun inboard towards me and give the wing more fulcrum on which to rotate. So when we start talking about, oh, you know, I'm having trouble working out getting a wedge set up on my holster, or you see a wedge that you might want to buy and it's one shape and one axis, keep in mind what your wedge needs might be and how these shapes work together to accomplish the result that you want.